Boom! Boom! Thump! The hurried knock on the door suddenly sounded in my ears, and then a man's urging voice came through the door. Matthew, why did you drive the makeup artist out? The director and heroine are already in place, and the entire crew is waiting for you. This hero, you have 15 minutes left. The owner of the voice seemed to be very strong. If you don't come out in 15 minutes, I'll go in and kill you. These words buzzed around his ears and drilled into his head. Matthew wanted to open his eyes, but he couldn't. It wasn't until the footsteps of leaving came from outside the door that he used all his strength to open a pair of eyes. Those were a pair of eyes as black as ink, filled with confusion that couldn't understand the situation. His dark eyes swept across the room quickly, and immediately confirmed, I've never been to this place. He looked down at himself again. Hey? Why am I here? He was lying crookedly on the wooden floor, with the door to one side of his head. No wonder those voices were ringing in his ears. Immediately afterwards, countless information suddenly flashed in his mind, and two completely different pictures, like movies shown on the same screen, were intertwined and entangled, making him unconsciously hug his head. As time passed, the confusion in his eyes gradually disappeared, and his head became more and more sober. He couldn't help but put his hands on the ground, slowly stood up, stood in front of a huge makeup mirror, and looked at the person in the mirror. This man was wearing only one pair of big pants, and was almost 1.85 meters tall. His naked upper body had clear muscle lines and was quite strong. Looking up, his hair was dark brown, and the lower face had a high nose and deep eyes. The knife and axe are generally sharp, and apart from the dark eyes, there is nothing similar to him. Looking at the person in the mirror, he bit his lower lip hard, and the sharp pain and the smell of blood came instantly. Then, I just stood here for a full 5 minutes, and gradually determined that something unbelievable had happened. His last memory is very clear. At that time, he was smashing cement on the construction site under the scorching sun and high temperature. Just as he was wiping away sweat and drinking water, the hammer of a nearby worker suddenly collapsed and fell on him impartially. On the face, I don't remember what happened after that. Maybe that tragic 20 years of life is over, right? He had a very hard life before. He was born in a poverty-stricken mountainous area. He was forced to work as a family after graduating from junior high school. When he was 18 years old, his parents who had been sick for many years died. A newcomer with no experience, no background, and no skills. He can only do some rough work. Originally, he wanted to earn enough money to learn skills, but he was unlucky when he encountered salary arrears and the boss ran away, asking for salary and being suppressed. I have been dragging it all the time to no avail. I can only go to the construction site to do the hardest work of moving bricks and smashing cement. Before I earn the money, it will be finished. Maybe ending that tragic life and starting over is not bad luck? Thinking of the hardships of his previous life, such thoughts popped up unconsciously. After all, he could be said to be unconcerned. However, this new life doesn't seem to be much better. Standing in front of the mirror, he patted his tough and handsome face, once again making sure that this was not a dream or an illusion. The foreigner in the mirror is called Matthew Horner. In the words of the Xiangxia novels he once read, he has successfully seized the house. In his hometown's words, it is because of his ghost. Luckily, the one who probably went to see King Yama, no, it should be Matthew Horner, who was supposed to see God, left enough memories. It's just that these memories flashed through his mind, and he or Matthew's face twitched. Because the past is really unbearable. This Matthew Horner, from the ghetto of Texas, was born in 1980, just 19 years old, that is to say, he was back in early 1999 at the turn of the century like most of the old American, multinational mixed-race product, and has a quarter of the Chinese bloodline, but unfortunately this bloodline is not obvious in appearance, the only thing it brings is probably black eyes. Except for his dark eyes, he is more like a Westerner in terms of skin color and appearance. 19-year-old Matthew Horner is also unskilled. Because he only read at heard of middle school, his education level is still at the stage where he will be able to read newspapers and books. He can't understand overly complicated English or grammar at all. And even more so in writing. One can imagine what kind of people such a person can become in this era. In the memories left, Matthew Horner delivered newspaper milk, worked as a car wash, washed dishes in a restaurant, worked as a driver after getting a driver's license, and later swung a sledgehammer on a construction site for a period of time. Hard work and life has exercised this strong muscle. In the second half of last year, I don't know who to listen to, thinking that my handsome appearance and tall and straight body are the material to be a star, so I foolishly came to Los Angeles to become an actor. Maybe it was time to run. And when I was working part-time as a driver in a party service company, I met a man. I really appreciate his agent. It was because of this agent that he came here. He came to this temporary studio in downtown Los Angeles, which was converted from a single house, and suddenly fell in the dressing room. Hey! Matthew sighed, and the information in his mind told him that the place he was in now was Los Angeles. He turned his eyes and looked around, whether it was the posters on the wall or the various decorations on the dressing table, wherever there were handwritings, they were all a string of foreign codes. Pulling out the chair, Matthew sat on it and continued to organize the memories in his brain. The spiritual wealth that this person left behind is really too embarrassing. He had no education before, and he still has no education. With his previous education level, he had no problem reading novels at a certain point, but now he has difficulty reading complex things. He has worked hard before, but he has a nest on the construction site. Now, for the dream of Hollywood stardom, his predecessor quit his original job and came here to be the male protagonist. Male protagonist? Matthew Huo stood up and remembered what someone reminded him in English before, which immediately made him relieved. He could understand English. Then, overjoyed, the man mentioned in his words that the director, the heroine, and even the entire crew, are all waiting for him as the hero. This is the male protagonist. Even the leading actor in a TV series has a lot of money to take, doesn't it? Wait. What's wrong with Matthew, the hero? What male protagonist? Is it the hero of a Hollywood movie? In an instant, he thought of those young movie stars who became famous overnight and became popular all over Hollywood. Although the education level is not high, there are too many popcorn movies in Hollywood. Before he was working hard, he would also download a few pirated copies to see, and he recognized some Hollywood stars. For example, he likes the Transformers series very much. He remembers that the heroine whose nickname is Little Fox is a typical example of overnight fame. Matthew couldn't help but jumped up from his chair excitedly, walked to the exit of the dressing room, quietly opened the door, and looked outside. The space outside is far larger than the dressing room, and it is magnificently furnished. You can see 6 or 7 people surrounding a black camera, as if they are busy arranging something. Opposite the camera is an off-white European-style couch. 2 people are standing by the sofa and talking. One is a middle-aged man with eyes, and the other is a woman. Could this be the director and heroine? Like most men, Matthew's eyes naturally fell on the woman. This woman had long straight blonde hair. From this angle, she couldn't see her face clearly. She could only see her height, long legs, and slenderness. In particular, her attire is quite cool. There is only a black tight vest on the upper body, which sets off a high chest and a flat belly. The lower body is designed with close-fitting jeans, which outlines the perfect leg line. Although he couldn't see his face, Matthew still classified this woman into the group of beauties. This must be the heroine. Matthew immediately recognized this, and it was definitely a beautiful job to play against such a heroine. He couldn't help laughing. The guy from before didn't have any skills, nor did he leave anything useful. He was very kind. The job he found seemed to be very good. Am I going to walk down the road to Hollywood? This kind of thought jumped into my mind, diluting the discomfort of Matthew coming to this world. Anyway, there is no nostalgia for the previous life, and it is not bad to live a vigorous life here, if you are lucky. Reading www.ugonshu. Can Com still be a big Hollywood star? Thinking of the information he had read on the smartphone before, Matthew suddenly realized that being an actor and a star does not seem to require a high level of education. It seems that many Hollywood stars have not finished high school, but they still succeeded in getting ahead. Maybe this is a way out? Since I came here, I am still faced with the current situation. It is useless to complain about others. It is better to adapt as soon as possible. At this moment, the blonde woman turned her head here, probably seeing Matthew's face in the crack of the door. She couldn't help but smiled and nodded lightly. Matthew also nodded, then glanced at the blonde woman's face. Why do you look familiar? He closed the door, went back to the dressing room, scratched his head, couldn't remember seeing it anywhere or in a Hollywood movie, so he simply put it aside and started to recall the information about the male protagonist. It looks like the filming is about to start. He has to figure out what is being filmed. If he doesn't even understand this, he will only waste this good opportunity to play the leading role. It's okay if I don't want to. When I think about it carefully, Matthew's face is pale in an instant, and a layer of fine beads of sweat oozes out of his forehead. He turned his head slightly and looked at a red bag on the dressing table. It was a tool bag specially prepared for him by the crew. Now the bag is not zipped up. From the opening, you can see that there are condoms, tissues, towels, baby wipes inside. Towels, lubricants, rubber gloves, and several special tools that he has only seen pictures of on the internet but never seen the real thing. Matthew staggered 2 steps and sat down on the chair in front of the vanity mirror, unable to say a word. This male protagonist, the male protagonist he is going to play, is the male protagonist of his ex's love and romantic action movie. Sitting blankly on the chair, more memories appeared in Matthew's head, which also made him confirm that what the crew was going to shoot was a romantic action movie. More importantly, the previous one not only knowingly and voluntarily, but also signed a formal contract. As for why, of course, it's for the money. Also, the agent fooled him, saying that this is the road to Hollywood and the back door to Hollywood movies. Matthew couldn't help rolling his eyes. Even someone like him who didn't know Lao Mei knew that after making such a film, how could he be a Hollywood star again? I'm afraid that one is not clear, but is covered by money. The previous one came to Los Angeles for a few months, and his life was very bad. He wanted to be an actor and couldn't even find a background role. The money is young and the poor have short ambitions. In addition, the agent he met was all messed up, and his appearance he is very predictable and even more predictable, just like many young people, his head is hot and he has embarked on this road of no return. No, it should be ready to go, isn't the filming yet to start? Thinking of this, Matthew can be considered relieved. If this kind of film is really made and released widely, where will there be face-to-face in the future? For someone like him with no culture and no skills, being an actor may be a way out, but being an actor like this is definitely a dead end. Matthew would rather be hit on the street with a hammer than star in such a film. After confirming this, and looking at the body wearing only a pair of big pants, Matthew looked for it in the dressing room, combined with the memory in his head, quickly found his clothes, and changed them without hesitation. This is a somewhat old denim suit, and it turned white after washing, but Matthew felt at ease when he wore it, and when he changed his clothes, he also discovered a little, why did the agent fool the previous one? Guy. Because his conditions are really good, he is tall and strong, his appearance is sunny and tough, and he has a dream of becoming a star. What's more important is that he has a unique talent, and his inner capital is not ordinary. Boom! Boom! Thump! The hurried knock on the door sounded again, and the voice I heard before came in through the door again, Matthew. What are you doing? The voice seemed a little angry. I didn't say, come out in 15 minutes, now. Matthew walked over, opened the door, and glanced at the bald white man with glasses outside. The relevant information immediately came to his mind. This was Maurice, the Flicker's agent. At number. Seeing Matthew wearing the clothes he was wearing, the bald man named Morris first scolded something starting with F, then came in and closed the door, staring. What are you doing? I'm quitting. Matthew said directly. Morris' eyes widened, as if he couldn't understand Matthew's words. What did you say? Don't use your Texas hillbilly accent. What Matthew blurted out just now was a non-Chinese and non-English sentence that was very awkward even to him. At this moment, he could not help coughing twice, and after a simple adjustment, he said, I say, I don't do it anymore. Obviously, he needs to get used to American English. You quit. Morris just thought Matthew was joking. Don't be long-winded, change your clothes quickly, the whole crew is waiting for you. I said. Matthew adjusted again, feeling that he could speak more smoothly, and put on a very serious tone, I quit. This is not a joke. Morris looked up at Matthew's face and confirmed that it was true. His eyes instantly turned cold. Are you crazy? This is not your driver's job, you can quit with words. You have a contract with the crew, if you break the contract. His voice turned cold, I want to accompany a lot of money. I don't have any money. Matthew had checked just now, and there were only a few $dozen in the wallet in his pocket. Then stop talking nonsense, stop nonsense. Morris's words gradually softened, this contract, you can get $8,000. Your conditions are so good, you will definitely become a big star and make a lot of money. $50,000, or even $100,000 is not a problem. As an agent who seduces young people by cheating, Morris knows how to impress these young people. With money, you no longer have to be a driver to send female models to others. You can let others send female models to you to play with. As long as you have money, you can do anything you want, and now the opportunity is in front of you. If you miss this opportunity, you won't have it again. His eyes moved down and fell between Matthew's legs. Not everyone can have a chance like you. A big hand fell on Matthew's shoulder and patted, don't waste your talent. Being stared at by such eyes, Matthew stood upside down with all the hairs all over his body, unconsciously pinching his legs, and sighing inwardly. Fortunately, the previous one hadn't done anything irreversible. Do you know how powerful this crew is? Morris was obviously an old-fashioned guy. The biggest shareholder of the company the crew belongs to is General Electric. They deal with people like you as easily as crushing an ant. When the stick ran out, Morris threw another sweet date. I introduced you to Jessica when I came in. Do you think she is beautiful and sexy? Matthew knew that he was talking about the blonde woman, and nodded unconsciously. Morris suddenly put on a weird tone, Jessica Derrick is a recognized beauty in the industry, you can her right away, as much as you like. Not only do you not have to pay, but you can also earn a lot of money, and is it more wonderful than this? If it wasn't for the crew to look down on me, I would do it. He patted Matthew's shoulder again, money and beauty are right in front of you, don't you want it? Me? As someone who has worked hard for 20 years, the temptation of money and beauty is not a big deal to Matthew. He swallowed, of course I want it. Hearing this, Morris laughed. How many of these poor boys from the countryside could resist this temptation? The guys who were kidnapped by him in the past were not without regrets on the spot, but under the coercion and temptation, they all took off their pants obediently. Of course this will not be an exception. Morris opened the door, turned his head and glanced at it. Looking through the room, he happened to see the tall and Jessica Derrick. He couldn't believe that this hairy boy who was less than 20 years old could bear it. Live it. Then, he keenly captured that Matthew's throat rolled one after another, his face was slightly red, and his eyes kept drifting out of the door. Seeing Matthew's appearance, Morris decided that he was back in his control, and began to think in his heart, this guy is so disobedient, and when the audience's freshness wears off, will he be pushed into that kind of super heavy production? For a person who has been poor for 20 years, even eating has become a problem for a time, the temptation of money and beauty is unimaginable. Matthew's blood rushed straight to his head, and the impulsive hormones in his body seemed to want him to nod in response, but after all, he is not a young boy who has just come into contact with society. Behind the temptation of fame and fortune, there may be a painful price to pay for a lifetime. He pulled his gaze back from the blonde woman little by little, his eyes gradually became firm, and the flush on his face quickly receded. Morris did not notice these changes, thinking that everything was under control, and was ready to reach out and pat Matthew on the shoulder. "Matthew, follow me, you will become a big star, make a lot of money, drive the best car, play with the most beautiful women." The hand he patted out stopped in midair, the shoulder had moved to one side, and the owner of the shoulder seemed to be very unwelcome to this hand. Morris' eyes widened instantly, and before he could say anything, Matthew said first, "I like money, and I like beauty." He smiled slightly, and then his tone changed, but not in this way. "What?" Morris' eyes widened. "What did you say?" "My meaning is very simple." Matthew pointed to his chest. "I quit." "You?" Morris stretched out a finger and pointed at Matthew, who suddenly raised his voice and shouted, "I quit." The voice spread throughout the studio, and countless people turned their heads to look over, and the middle-aged director wearing glasses walked over directly. "What's going on?" The director came in and asked. "I'm quitting." Matthew said first, "Please ask for another one." "What do you want to do?" The director, who also served as the producer of the crew, immediately looked at Morris. Morris shook his head, indicating that he had nothing to do with him, but the face under the bald head was almost twisted with anger. The director pointed at Matthew and said to him, "Get him. Do you know the consequences of a breach of contract?" Morris' face turned black. "You have to accompany a large amount of liquidated damages. The cost of the costumes, props, and condoms that the crew customized for you, reading www.yuyugonshu.com, you have to pay 10 times the price. Also, do you think you can walk out easily?" Matthew interrupted him suddenly. "You don't need to scare me, I have nothing, I'm a pauper with nothing." He grabbed the mobile phone from his pocket and shook it in front of Morris. "As long as I press it, the police will be called. I remember this is the bustling part of Los Angeles, right? Do you want to deal with the police?" "Humph!" Morris snorted. "It's not the 1970s and 1980s, and some things can't be messed up. This is a sensitive industry, and it might cause big trouble." The director and producer suddenly said, "It's okay if you don't do it, 5 times the liquidated damages of your film contract, and in addition to increasing the cost of the team on you, I will ask the company's legal counsel to claim $50,000 from you." Temporary substitutions are very common in this industry. Even when an actor suddenly quits and cannot find a suitable person, he, the director, will appear on the stage to perform in person. Although this young man is very talented, he is more reluctant to waste precious time. "I'll ask the company's legal counsel to claim the money from you," the director and producer said indifferently, as if Matthew's remorse was just a trivial matter. He turned and walked outside. Before leaving the house, he threw a sentence at Morris, "Find someone more reliable next time." The director left. Matthew shrugged to Morris, "Goodbye." After speaking, he was ready to leave immediately. "Get ready for $50,000. The company always does what it says it does." Morris stopped in front of him. "Boy, I'll make you bankrupt. Come and beg me." "Whatever." Matthew is now barefoot and not afraid of wearing shoes, bypassing Morris and saying, "Los Angeles is so big, you can cover the sky with one hand." When he left in big strides, apart from his manager Morris, including the former director and producer. Not many people in the crew paid attention to Matthew. It seemed that they were used to this kind of situation, and it was not surprising at all. Pushing open the door, walking out of the temporary studio, and seeing the blue sky and white clouds and the wide and quiet road outside, Matthew let out a long sigh of relief. The ghost upper body of the Pacific Ocean, and the ease after jumping out of an trap. He didn't have a car, he came in the agent's car, and now Morris would definitely not send him, so he had to walk forward along the wide road according to the direction he remembered. The temperature in Los Angeles in January was not too low, and after walking a short distance, Matthew took off his jacket, and the breeze blew on him through the long-sleeved sweater, which made him feel much more comfortable. There were 2 rows of tall palm trees planted on both sides of the road. Every time Matthew passed by one, he would look up. Before, he had been in the north, and he had to run around for the most basic livelihoods such as 3 meals a day, and he did not go to the south at all. Playtime. Now, I finally don't have to swing a sledgehammer, but I still have to worry about my livelihood. The memory left by the previous person told Matthew that the dozens of dollars and a second-hand mobile phone on him were all his property. In addition, the crew and Agent Morris will never let him go easily. A liquidated damage of $50,000 may not be a big deal in Hollywood, but it is not a small amount in this industry. I am afraid it will not take long to receive a lawyer's letter or court subpoenas and the like. Even if the settlement is out of court, it is bound to pay a lot of money. To him now, such a sum of money is nothing short of astronomical. As soon as I came here, I might owe a large amount of debt, and I might not be able to pay it in a short time. At that time, they won't be able to pay their debts, will they? Force yourself to keep making love romance action movies? Looking at the attitude of the crew, it doesn't matter. I'm afraid that the agent named Morris really won't let him go easily. Hey! Matthew was worried, if you change to another place, you are still a miserable person. Although he was a little worried, he didn't complain, and he was used to the hard life. There was a bench under the palm tree in front. After Matthew passed by, regardless of the dust on the chair, he sat directly on it, leaned on the back of the wooden chair, looked up at the blue sky and white clouds, and thought about what to do in the future? Or are you struggling at the bottom as before, and your goal is only the most basic survival? Don't you like money and beauty? The words of the agent Morris suddenly flashed in his mind, and Matthew couldn't help thinking of the blonde beauty. Although her face was not as attractive as her figure, it also made him restless all over. Do you want to be mediocre and do nothing for the rest of your life at the bottom of the society, or work hard to climb to a higher level? Is it still a choice? Matthew gradually clenched his fists. I want to live a better life. I want to roll around in the banknotes. I want to party with a group of beauties. He didn't have much cultivation, and he didn't receive higher education. He was just a little guy struggling at the bottom. His goals or ideals were so vulgar and realistic. I have a goal, how to achieve it? Matthew lowered his head and looked at the wide road. The goal can be set higher than the sky, but if you want to get close to the goal, you must not only walk step by step, but also find a suitable road. For example, being the President of the United States can also achieve goals, but he is obviously not that kind of material. This road is not easy to find. The hard life in the past has made Matthew understand that the phenomenon of class solidification in this world is very serious. Easy. Although I don't know Lao Mei, I used to live in a highly information-based society, and a smartphone can see countless information that is true or false. Therefore, Matthew believes that Lao Mei should be more difficult than his own country in this regard. Even if there is a chance, it is reserved for those who are prepared and capable, not a guy with no skills like him. Matthew is not underestimating himself, but he has experienced hard work and understands that the goal can be set very grand, but the road to the goal must be down to earth step by step. After sitting for a while, Matthew stood up and continued to walk forward, conducting self-analysis while walking, trying to find out what he is best at. After all, he has the memories of two people stored in his brain, and he can always find something useful. High tech? He knew nothing. Finance? How can a person who is worried about 3 meals a day care about these things? Write some novels that have been adapted into Hollywood movies to earn royalties? He graduated from junior high school and talked about his grades, while the previous one, who had not finished middle school, had a problem reading complex and advanced articles, even if he didn't mention his writing level. Apart from this good-looking body and a handful of strength, and apart from driving, he really doesn't seem to have any skills that he is good at. After analyzing a circle, Matthew sadly found that even if he combined what two people had learned, he couldn't do the mental work that was tall and lucrative. At this moment, he felt that the sad words of the young and the strong who did not work hard were very reasonable. Matthew stopped under a palm tree and suddenly felt that the guy who came to Los Angeles to pursue his dream of being a Hollywood star was not a spur of the moment. In terms of his own talent and the environment he was in, the chance to emerge in Hollywood seemed real. A little more than other high-level industries. The most important thing is that Hollywood has relatively low barriers to entry. In the relevant information collected by that guy, Jim Carrey worked as a cleaner, Madonna worked as a fast food restaurant salesperson, and Brad Pitt played McDonald's promotional auspiciousness. Things: Johnny Depp worked as a pen phone salesman, Harrison Ford was a carpenter, and even James Cameron was a truck driver. These famous Hollywood figures, before they became famous, were just like him. They were true losers and real losers. However, these former losers are now all enviable with both fame and fortune. There are too many similar examples, too many to list. Hollywood seems to be the best industry for Diozzi to become tall, rich, and handsome. But he felt that things would never be as simple as it seemed, he just didn't know it. After thinking about it, Matthew found the way to his goal. It seems that Hollywood is the most realistic and has the highest probability of success. A person's position determines the boundaries of his vision. Matthew stood at the bottom of society and looked up, only to find this ladder called Hollywood. Hollywood. Matthew raised his head and looked in the direction of the Hollywood Hills in his memory. It's you. Thinking of Hollywood, a scene of success immediately appeared in front of his eyes. He lived in the most luxurious manor in Beverly Hills. The garage parked a limited edition of famous cars. Dozens of naked blondes were laughing and playing in the swimming pool in front of the villa. Countless media reporters lined up in long queues to interview. This is life. This is the life he wants. Anyway, he couldn't think of other opportunities to change his fate. Matthew decided to continue his former Hollywood star dream and see if he could also become a Diozzi and become tall, rich, and handsome. With the goal and finding the way to the goal, he felt much more relaxed in an instant, stretched out his long legs, and strode forward. I want to make a lot of money. Matthew suddenly shouted, I want to be a big star. This roar made the two young men who were riding bicycles look sideways at him, looked at him with neurotic eyes, then shook their heads and walked away. After Matthew roared these few words, his depressed mood brightened, even though he knew that the road would be difficult. The former one, after coming to Los Angeles, signed up for an agency specializing in acting business, but he never got the opportunity to participate in Hollywood movies, not to mention his income, so he could only work part-time as a driver in a party service company. And then was fooled by another agent and got a pizza that looked delicious but was extremely bitter to eat. Recalling all the memories related to Hollywood, Matthew is sure that he can't find an opportunity for the time being. He can only get a job and establish himself in Los Angeles like the rumored big stars, and then he will do everything possible to find an opportunity that suits him. Thinking of work, Matthew thinks that the job of the driver he quit before is good. He goes to work every evening and is responsible for sending people part-time. Moreover, in this job, it is possible to get in touch with people in the Hollywood industry, but the predecessor was unlucky and decided to go through the so-called back door of Hollywood before he persisted. After thinking about it, Matthew thought it was necessary to continue this job. He took out his second-hand mobile phone, searched for a while, and dialed a number. "Hello." A humble male voice sounded, "This is the Red Penguin Company, can I help you?" "Hello, Mr. List." Matthew has been in the society for many years and knows what to say now, with a hint of flattery in his voice. "I'm Matthew Horner, and I'm here with you again." The voice immediately became arrogant. "Is it your kid? What are you looking for from me?" "It's okay, I'll hang up." Don't. Matthew said hurriedly, "Didn't I just want to ask you to continue eating? Didn't you resign?" The voice was not forgiving at all. "Aren't you going to be a big star and make a lot of money?" Matthew continued to lower his body. "It's all my ignorance, I was deceived, or you have the vision to see through it at a glance that it's a scam." "Ha, I'll just say it, kid." The man was obviously comfortable. "You lack experience, you need to learn more from me. I just plan to continue learning with you." Matthew immediately followed his words and said, "I don't know if I'm not deceived, Mr. List, you are really kind to me." "Okay, don't say it's useless." The voice on the phone softened a lot. "Do you want to come back and continue working? I'll give you half an hour, and you can come to the company in half an hour, and you will go to work tonight." Matthew quickly assured, "I'll be there." The yellow taxi was parked next to a 4-story building on Hollywood Boulevard. Matthew paid and pushed the door and got out of the car. He took out his mobile phone and checked. There was still plenty of time. The most striking thing outside the gate of the building is a penguin sculpture painted red. Above the penguin is a small copper plate sign clearly engraved with a line of bold letters, Red Penguin Service Company. Matthew recalled some relevant information, strode into the small building, and a beautiful female clerk came over immediately at the front desk. Just as he was about to greet him, he found a familiar face and couldn't help but stop. "Hi." Matthew greeted casually, "I have an appointment with Mr. List." The female clerk didn't mean to stop her, nodded and said, "He should be in the office." Matthew went up the stairs and quickly came to the front of an office on the 3rd floor. He knocked lightly on the door, and after the sound of "Please come in" came from inside, he pushed open the door and walked in. "Ah, our big star is here." With an obvious mocking voice, it sounded immediately, "Big star, have you earned enough money and are going to have a carnival party?" There are 3 people in this office, the one talking is a bald black man, and the other 2 are a fat man and a tall and thin middle-aged man. "Have you made a lot of money?" Fatty also sneered, "When will your work be shown? Remember to inform us, we will definitely be there to help you." "Don't say thank you." The black man has a pair of very small eyes, and he always narrowed his eyes when he looked at people. "Just provide us with free movie tickets." Speaking of which, he seemed to be unable to bear it any longer, and he burst out laughing. Fatty was also laughing. He tapped the table lightly with one hand, as if he had discovered the funniest thing in the world. The tall and thin man didn't speak, but he was still laughing. Matthew ignored the fat man and the black man, went straight to the tall and thin desk, and said respectfully, "Mr. List, I'm here." "Well." List nodded. "I'm very sorry now that I didn't listen to you." Matthew knew that he wanted to satisfy List's vanity, and the other party was the person in charge of the company's driver. "I've been deceived and regretted to death, I hope you can give me a chance." "Young man," List said carelessly, "you must learn how to learn from experience." Matthew nodded hastily, "Yes." List added, "You need to know that you are down to earth." Matthew continued to nod, "Yes." Seeing that Matthew's attitude was very good, List said, "You worked really hard before, but now the stock market is hot, those have all quit their jobs to invest in stocks, and the company is short on staff, so I'll give you another chance." "Thank you." Matthew knew that the latter was the main reason. "I will definitely work hard." List took out 2 forms from the drawer, picked up a pen and scratched on them a few times, made another call, and handed the forms to Matthew, "Go through the formalities." Matthew took the form and, according to the information in his memory, ran to the second floor to go through the onboarding procedures. List had greeted him, and Matthew had worked here before. In less than half an hour, Matthew completed the entry procedures and returned to the third floor to speak to List so that he could go out and find a place to live. Come back to work tomorrow. You don't have to wait for tomorrow. List didn't let Matthew go, but threw him a bunch of car keys. You start work tonight, is there a problem? Matthew now has a request from others, of course he will not refuse, and immediately said, no problem. List handed over a dozen documents to Sean. Now the company is understaffed, these few days. I'm always on call. Matthew seemed very positive. Well, good. List nodded with satisfaction. Johnny Lee Miller is a heavyweight client of the company, and I will serve him tonight. Then List told Matthew a few more words. Matthew left the third floor, and went outside to buy some cheap things to fill his stomach. Then he went to the driver's lounge on the first floor to see the specific work in the documents. Unlike his memory, there was no one in the driver's room. It seems that the company is encountering a shortage of employees. Sitting on a chair, Matthew opened the information and looked at it carefully. After all, it was related to tonight's work. In fact, this work is not complicated, it is relatively simple. A heavyweight client of the company named Johnny Lee Miller is going to party in a beach villa in Malibu, a single super party, a man and the kind that women attend. His job is to go to various parts of Los Angeles in the afternoon to pick up female models who have business connections with the company, send them to Malibu, and then pull them back the next morning. After closing the documents and combining the memory in his head, Matthew understood that these female models are high-end in some respects. Red Penguin provides high-end party services, and by the way, they will also do some pimping work. The company encounters a shortage of drivers. I am afraid that it is not only caused by the so-called resignation and stock speculation caused by the stock market soaring, but also has nothing to do with the nature of the job. Anyone who has some way out and ability, who is willing to do this kind of work. But now he doesn't have the capital to be picky eaters. After staying in the driver's cab for a while and packing up the documents, Matthew went to the underground parking lot, drove a Ford Nanny car, and drove onto the road. At the beginning, he drove carefully, and after driving for a while, his courage gradually grew, and the memory of his ex seemed to have completely become his. As long as he thought about it, the relevant memory would appear immediately. Matthew drove all the way west. He had already planned a route. First, he would go to Westwood to pick up one person, then North Hollywood to pick up the remaining 5, and then directly to Malibu's beach-rich area. After entering the Westwood district, the Ford Nanny car turned left and right, and soon stopped outside the courtyard of a beautiful 2-story building. Matthew looked at the spacious house and sighed deeply. Can you live in a house like this? It's time to work hard. He honked the horn, and after a few seconds, the door of the small building was pushed open from the inside, and a blonde girl in shorts and a t-shirt came out and waved to this side through the iron railing of the yard. Wait for me 10 minutes. The girl shouted loudly. Matthew lowered the car window and made an okay gesture. This girl was very punctual. After 10 minutes, she walked out of the small building with a large bag, got into the car, and sat directly next to Matthew. Hi. She looked sunny and cheerful. I'm Rachel. I'm Matthew. Matthew turned his head and glanced at her. The girl had long brown and blonde hair, changed into a formal dress, and had a slender waist and long legs. In any way, she was more beautiful and more energetic than the blonde woman she had seen in the morning. Started the car and drove onto the road leading to North Hollywood. Matthew concentrated on driving. The girl next to him seemed to be familiar and kept talking to him. Are you new here? Rachel asked him curiously, why haven't I seen you before? Matthew slowly increased the speed. I used to be in charge of other aspects. In the past, Matthew was responsible for some low-end businesses. Rachel kept staring at Matthew. Handsome guy, it's a waste of you to be a driver. Really? Matthew said boldly, I think so too. After her speaking, he laughed first. Rachel also laughed. After a while, she said, are you interested in being a model? I can introduce you to a specialized company. This model, Matthew, didn't have any interest. He shook his head and said, the driver is more suitable for me. I'm an old driver. Che. The girl did not hide the disappointment on her face. How much can the driver earn? Is it enough to support you? Matthew was silent and didn't want to continue the discussion in this area. Rachel seemed to have a good personality, and she probably felt that what she said just now was a bit too much, so she took the initiative to change the subject. The two chatted for a while, and Matthew asked about more girls intentionally or unintentionally. The other party was somewhat similar to him. He originally came to Hollywood to find his star dream, but not everyone had the luck of Julia Roberts. Can only be a model by accident. The car gradually entered the boundary of North Hollywood, which, like the Westwood District, belongs to a relatively good residential area in Los Angeles. Matthew picked up the other 5 girls one after another, and drove away towards Malibu. The 5 girls who came up behind were different from Rachel, taller and more sexy, each with heavy makeup and hot body, and they ranged from blacks, whites, Latinos to Asians. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. It seems that Red Penguin is very consider the customer's taste. I don't know why, Matthew always felt that these 5 female models were somewhat similar to the blonde woman in the morning in some respects, especially in temperament. When the sun turned to the west, the Ford nanny car arrived at the beach villa area in Malibu. There were mansions after mansions, even the smallest one. With Matthew's current income level, he would not be able to work his whole life. The car drove into a small manor, and the girls got off the car one after another. Before getting off the car, they asked for Matthew's phone number and asked where the car would be waiting. Matthew then started the car and drove to the gate of the manor according to the requirements of the manor guard. As he walked along, his eyes kept drifting to both sides. The fountains, private swimming pools, tennis courts, front gardens, tall courtyard walls with grids, and heavily guarded gates, the luxurious decoration made people sigh. When can I have such a house? When driving out of the gate of the manor, Matthew's head was full of such thoughts. He didn't leave, but turned around and parked the car in a small parking area diagonally opposite the manor. According to the regulations of the Red Penguin Company, he must wait here with the car in case of emergency. The sun was setting soon, the sky was getting dark, and the sound of dense music was faintly heard from the manor. Matthew looked up, and laser beams lit up in the night sky, and a carnival began. Thinking of those 6 young and beautiful girls, Matthew couldn't help but envy in his heart. Thump thump, the door of the car was suddenly knocked from outside. Matthew turned his head to look. At some point, a man wearing a baseball cap and carrying a handbag came to the car. Can we talk? This is a woman's voice. You are. With the effort of speaking, Matthew turned on the dome light of the Ford car. The light came through the window and fell on the man outside, so that he could see that it was indeed a woman. Matthew looks very vigilant. The world is full of sunlight, but the places where the sunlight cannot reach is full of darkness. Those who are invaded by darkness even dare to do some crazy things for the slightest benefit. Did you? The woman lifted the baseball bat, revealing her long brown hair tied into a ponytail, and pointed to the manor. Send a lot of women in there. Matthew didn't answer, but looked at her up and down. This woman is very thin, she should be about 1.7 meters tall, and the recognition is quite high. This is mainly concentrated in 2 aspects, plump and thick lips, and the incompatibility with the slender body, the towering boobs. Although the other party does not conform to his aesthetics, she can be regarded as an alternative temperament beauty. Get in the car. He opened the other door. Get in the car and talk about something. The woman walked around from the front of the car, got into the Ford nanny car, and sat on the seat next to the driver's seat with her handbag at her feet. Matthew has relaxed his vigilance, because he recognized who this woman is. Unless Angelina Jolie is crazy, she will come here at night to rob a pauper. Thanks to his relationship with Tomb Raider, seeing the towering and plump lips, Matthew was sure that this woman was Angelina Jolie. "You haven't answered my question yet," Angelina Jolie reminded. "I'm sorry," Matthew said righteously, "I can't answer you, it's not in line with my professional ethics." Angelina Jolie didn't speak. She took out her wallet from her pocket, took out 5 green bills, and placed them between the 2 seats. Matthew glanced, saw 2 zeros hanging behind the one, and immediately nodded, "Yes, I sent 6 women, Miss Julie." It's impossible to see too much of this kind of professional ethics in a person who has only a few dozen dollars in his body and who doesn't know how to eat tomorrow after today. However, Matthew is not stupid, and directly pointed out the identity of Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie is not surprised that Matthew can recognize herself. She also has a certain reputation in Hollywood. Matthew glanced at Julie. He couldn't understand such a time, such a place. How could such a Hollywood star come to his car? It doesn't matter if he doesn't understand. He grabbed the $5 bills and stuffed them into his pocket first. When Angelina Jolie saw Matthew's greed for money, she felt that she had found the right person. "Want to make more money?" Angelina Jolie asked suddenly. Matthew turned his head and looked at Julie's square face with distinct facial features. Angelina Jolie was and had a bad reputation, but he wouldn't be stupid enough to think that the other party was coming over to have sex. There must be something to tell. Human purpose. What would such a Hollywood celebrity want to do when he came here at night and found his strong-looking driver? Matthew guesses that it is very likely to be a shameful thing. He immediately figured it out. What benefits can I get? Who doesn't like money? Matthew nodded vigorously. Angelina Jolie pointed to the other side of the manor again. "Do you know who is having a party there?" "Johnny Lee Miller." Matthew had read the relevant information before, the big star who played Trainspotting. "Do you know him?" Angelina Jolie asked again. Matthew really didn't know him, to tell the truth. "I've only seen his photos." "Okay." Angelina Jolie seemed satisfied and said, "As long as you do what I say, you can get $5,000. Hearing $5,000, Matthew immediately came to his senses, but said, "I won't do anything illegal. Going to jail for a mere $5,000 is too low a price. It's very simple." Angelina Jolie opened her handbag and took out a small DV camera. "You take this, go to the manor, and that Johnny Lee Miller with women. Take all the pictures, come back and give it to me, the $5,000 is yours." "What?" Matthew widened his eyes and pointed to himself. "You asked me to take a candid photo." Then, he realized that something was wrong. "Why are you afraid of these things?" Angelina Jolie looked at him and asked coldly, "Do you want to do it or not? This kind of thing is definitely risky, especially Johnny Lee Miller is still a rich man." Matthew's head is turning fast. Why did Angelina Jolie do this? If he doesn't understand this, he doesn't dare to say anything, or he might go to jail. When I asked for a salary, I had tasted that feeling. Presumably, a country like Laos would be even more terrifying in it. Looking at Angelina Jolie's square face with distinct facial features, looking at the manor not far away, and thinking about the little information about Jolie in his head, Matthew suddenly thought of a possibility. He asked immediately, "Johnny Lee Miller is your husband?" Angelina Jolie didn't deny it. "It's almost a well-known thing, right?" She thought he already knew it. "You want me to help you catch a rape?" After confirming that Johnny Lee Miller and Julie were a couple, Matthew suddenly understood. "Or are you going to divorce him?" Angelina Jolie looked at Matthew with a surprised look. This man's head was turning fast enough. "You don't need to know." Angelina Jolie put the DV in the middle of the two seats again. Do you want to do it or not? Matthew didn't answer immediately. Instead, he thought about it. It's risky, but it's not impossible. But isn't $5,000 too little? The person sitting next to her is Angelina Jolie, who is quite a famous Hollywood star even if she has no future fame and fortune. Hollywood, Hollywood. The name kept circling in Matthew's mind, and he suddenly said, "Why don't you go in person?" Angelina Jolie snorted, "I'll walk to the gate of the manor, and the people inside will know I'm here." She looked gloomy for a moment, and said in a barely traceable voice, "I'm going to make that pay for it." She had already hired a private detective, and a few days ago, she announced that she was going to film The Soul-Shifting Girl. She gave Johnny Lee Miller such a chance. In fact, people kept staring at him, but unfortunately this manor surrounded by tall courtyard walls with power grids on them, private investigators couldn't get in at all, so they managed to find the Red Penguin Company and contact the driver who specializes in high-end business. The driver has never been in contact with. Fortunately, the private detective was always watching here. After getting the news, she immediately came over. Divorce with Johnny Lee Miller is imperative, but divorce is related to a lot of common property. If you want Johnny Lee Miller to voluntarily give in, you must have something heavyweight. With her character, only by manipulating all this with her own hands can she obtain the pleasure of wanton revenge after being betrayed. So, she didn't ask the bodyguard or agent to come forward at all. Instead, she operated it herself. After she got what she wanted, she would unite the forces around her to make that lose face. If another Hollywood star appeared here, Matthew would definitely think that there was something wrong with the other party's head. Who would act foolishly in such a matter? But Angelina Jolie feels normal to him. Who doesn't know that this woman was a crazy woman when she was young? And it can be seen that Angelina Jolie is more and more like a volcano that may erupt at any time. But he was not afraid of the flames of the volcano, instead he felt inexplicably excited, and it seemed that he was very, very lucky. The guy from before, he had to wait for a few months when he came to Los Angeles. He just became a pimp company. Oh no, he became an old driver and sent a few female models to heavyweight clients. I didn't expect this heavyweight. The client turned out to be Angelina Jolie's husband, and the angry Jolie was going to find him to settle the account. This is really good luck. This is an opportunity. How could someone like Matthew not understand the importance of opportunity? In his cognition, full of talents, it is not as good as a suitable opportunity. Although he is a scumbag, he also knows to seize the opportunity. Isn't this Angelina Jolie a good opportunity to pry open the door of Hollywood? But how to catch it? The sudden good luck made Matthew a little excited, so he calmed down and said, "Okay. I've done it. With these $5,000, he can rent a house to live in first, which is considered to have a place to live in Los Angeles, and then he plans to pursue a great Hollywood career." Yes. Angelina Jolie agreed directly, "As long as you can take pictures of what I want, my bodyguard will send $5,000 immediately." Matthew raised his head and glanced at Angelina Jolie again. This is not the kind of woman with no brains. The words just now clearly meant a warning, implying that her bodyguard was nearby. "Okay." Matthew stretched out a hand, "Deal." Angelina Jolie didn't mean to hold it, so he had to withdraw his hand angrily and said, "You wait here, I'll go right away." Matthew put DV into a tote bag, took off his coat and covered it, and soon came to the gate of the manor. "Why are you here again?" The guard at the gate of the manor stopped him. "Didn't someone send it?" "Hey, man!" Matthew pointed to the Ford car that was vaguely visible behind. "The company told me to wait there, but there is no toilet there. I want a large one. Can I borrow the toilet?" When Matthew drove in before, he had already dealt with them. The guard looked at the handbag he was carrying. "My clothes." Matthew lifted the bag generously, and a roll of toilet paper. The guard waved at him, "Go in, walk along the driveway to the fountain, turn right 200 feet, and there is the toilet." "Thank you." Matthew entered the manor. "Don't run around," the guard urged. "Rest assured." Matthew walked towards the fountain in front of the manor house, ready to take a risk. If he can really photograph something, he will have the money to bargain with Angelina Jolie. For those who haven't collected it yet, click to add to the bookshelf. For those who have referral tickets, give them a few more. Starting from next Monday, there will be 2 updates a day. The sound of music gradually subsided, and the villa was shrouded in darkness. Matthew got out from the side door and immediately turned off the DV camera. With the help of the light of the street light, he saw someone walking in front of him. He hurriedly lay behind a bush to avoid the security personnel. Then he put the DV into the handbag, covered it with clothes, looked around vigilantly, the surroundings were quiet, and hurriedly walked towards the gate of the manor. In his head, the pictures he stole in the banquet hall of the villa flashed, and he couldn't help but sigh with admiration. This is life. Johnny Lee Miller singled out 6 beauties. This scene is really exciting. These really know how to play. After passing the fountain, Matthew stopped covering it up and walked out along the driveway. 1 to 6 is a waste. He shook his head. These rich and famous Hollywood stars have a good life. Soon, Matthew arrived at the gate of the manor and waved to the guard. "Thank you, man." It took only 10 minutes before and after, but the guard had no doubts, nodded and said, "If you need to come pick up someone, I will inform you in advance." "Good. Good." Matthew responded quickly, "No problem." Following the small door next to the guard, he left the manor and walked towards the Ford nanny car. This trip was smooth and safe. Coming to the side of the car, Matthew opened the car door and went directly to the driver's seat. Angelina Jolie immediately looked at the handbag in his hand. "Did you take a picture?" Matthew didn't answer, but took out the DV camcorder, turned on the small screen, turned to Angelina Jolie, turned it on and pressed the play button. "Okay." Angelina Jolie's face was very ugly. "I'll have someone bring the money over." After speaking, she took out her phone and was about to make a call, but Matthew stopped her. "Wait, Miss Julie." Angelina Jolie looked here, her thick eyebrows furrowed tightly. Matthew turned off the DV camera and said weakly, "Besides the $5,000, I have a very small request." He glanced at Julie, tried his best to say softly, "It's really small." Angelina Jolie looked at the DV camera in Matthew's hand and said coldly, "Speak." "That, Miss Julie." Matthew thought about his words, so as not to beat the chickens. I am also an actor, a little actor without any fame, can't compare with a big man like you, me. It's been a long time. I didn't get a job." Angelina Jolie's face was even more gloomy than before, and she seemed to want to speak. Matthew quickly said, "Please listen to me, please." Regardless of whether Angelina Jolie listened or not, he spoke faster, "I just want to ask you to help me get a job at the right time." "Impossible." Angelina Jolie refused directly, "I'll let someone bring you money, you're too greedy." Matthew knew that she must have misunderstood, and said quickly, "I'm not asking for a character with a name or a surname, nor a character with lines, I just want to appear in the camera, even as a background board." He said this very carefully, his tone was extremely sincere, and he used a completely pleasing tone, for fear that Julie would take it as coercion. She couldn't make a fat man in one bite, and Angelina Jolie couldn't agree to her excessive demands. Although this crazy woman doesn't have the same brain as ordinary people, she is not a lunatic after all. He thought about it carefully, and just wanted to take this opportunity tonight to take the first step to truly become a Hollywood actor. The memory of the previous one clearly told him that this first step, which seemed to have a low threshold, was actually not good. Come to Los Angeles with the dream of an actor like him, but there is no chance to act as a background board, there are many people. The beginning is always difficult. This is Matthew's understanding. Just like waiting in the labor market, people like to use experienced people for jobs with a little technical content. Although I don't know much about Hollywood, it shouldn't be difficult for a star like Angelina Jolie to come up with a role that doesn't even have lines and only needs to act as a background board. Angelina Jolie sat there, didn't speak for a while, just kept looking at Matthew and found that this guy was smarter than she thought. He's very greedy. This was her impression, but she knew enough was enough. A small character acting as a background board is really not difficult for her, and she doesn't even need to speak. For example, in this film that is being filmed, let the assistant ask the casting director to mention it. After all, she is the second heroine. Is it more important to bring the husband who betrayed her into disrepute and suffer in future divorce lawsuits, or is such a trivial request more important? Had Angelina Jolie suddenly laughed. A few years ago, not only would she not agree, but she would ask the bodyguard to come over and take care of him. Even if she couldn't get the content of the filming, people would grow up slowly, and she could not always be that crazy, the confused little girl. As she grows older, her head has become more and more clear. Otherwise, how could the career have been steadily rising in the past few years? Angelina Jolie said slowly, "Do you have a business card?" Hearing this, Matthew quickly found a piece of paper and pen, wrote down the phone and handed it to Angelina Jolie. Jolie tucked it into her pocket, took out her mobile phone and dialed a number, "Bring the money here." Matthew breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that he might have seized this opportunity. However, he immediately raised his vigilance again, because a sturdy white man walked in front of him. Fortunately, the white man gave Angelina Jolie a paper package and quickly left. Angelina Jolie opened the paper bag and found a stack of brand new banknotes, which was obviously specially prepared. She didn't say much, and threw the banknotes over. Matthew caught the banknotes and returned the DV camera. Putting away the DV camera, Angelina Jolie was about to get out of the car and leave, but suddenly turned around and asked curiously, "Aren't you worried that I won't say anything?" "I'm worried," Matthew said honestly, "I can't help but bet on your character. The difference in status between the two is too great. Julie and the bodyguard are here, maybe the bodyguard is still carrying a gun, what can he do? This is simply an unequal verbal agreement, and he knew it from the very beginning. If Julie just said and didn't do it, she could only admit that she was unlucky. Matthew can only bet that this matter is not worth mentioning to Angelina Jolie, that it takes no effort at all, and that he got $5,000. Even if Angelina Jolie lied to him, he actually earned it. Probably got what she wanted. Angelina Jolie would be in a better mood, as long as you don't talk nonsense. Without video materials, nonsense is useless. Especially for Hollywood, there is no true or false rumor about a star. As long as there is no evidence to prove it, it will always be a rumor. Matthew made a zipper gesture, "I promise." Of course he won't talk nonsense now. Maybe without Angelina Jolie's help, if he continues to wait, there will be opportunities in the future. After all, the threshold for being an extra is not high, but what he has seen and heard today makes him really not want to wait. Now, desperate for a better life, like Johnny Lee Miller on the estate. As long as Angelina Jolie keeps her word, it will greatly speed up the process. Although he has changed to another country, Matthew believes that it is better to have a network of connections. Angelina Jolie got out of the car and quickly disappeared into the night. Matthew guessed that she would divorce Johnny Lee Miller before long. Huge property damage. Is it too rude to do this? Matthew remembered his professional ethics at this time, and then shook his head again. "A little guy like me, if you want to get ahead, you can't be rigid. As for professional ethics? It's not too late to talk until you have money." He took out the $5,000 and threw it on his hand, making a crisp sound, which was very pleasant and very pleasant. The feeling of being rich. Matthew's fingers gently rubbed Franklin on the banknotes, it's so good. After collecting the $5,000, he sat and read the magazine. Matthew checked the time, closed the car door, and went to sleep in the chair behind. When he woke up, the sky was already dark. Liang, after taking a bottle of mineral water and washing his face, the guard at the gate of the manor came over and told him to pick him up after a while. Matthew drove to the front door of the manor villa, and 6 girls with disheveled clothes got into the car one after another. They smelled of alcohol, cigarettes, and some other indescribable smells. Not sleeping. These female models sat on the seats without a word. Even Rachel, who had chatted with him all the way yesterday, collapsed on the seats so tired. Matthew started the car and shook his head slightly. These girls looked beautiful, but in reality. He stopped thinking about it, drove the girls back one by one, and then returned to the company to return the keys according to the regulations. The day's work was considered complete. After work, he immediately went to the nearest real estate agency. Now that he has some money, he is ready to rent a suitable residence. He had a good rest last night. Matthew was full of energy. He went to 3 real estate agents in a row and saw 7 ordinary single apartments. Finally, he rented an old apartment building in an ordinary residential area outside Zimu district. Single room that can be moved in with a bag. This room is very small, less than 20 square meters, with a miniature independent bathroom. Because the old walls are falling off, the monthly rent is only $400. Matthew paid the fee for half a year at one time, and he has a place in Los Angeles. Point. In the evening, he continued to drive for the Red Penguin Company. The work was similar, and it did not affect the rest at night. He could still have energy to do other things the next day. When he got off work again in the morning, Matthew had just walked out of the Red Penguin Company when his phone rang. He pressed the answer button, and a professional female voice came from the receiver. "Hello, I'm Vanessa, Miss Julie's assistant." Hanging up the phone and standing at the door of the Red Penguin Company, Matthew waved his fist vigorously. This is the first step towards becoming a star and opening up a better life in the future. It is finally here. The person who called was Angelina Jolie's assistant. She told Matthew to go to the Universal Studios studio north of Burbank next Monday to audition with his agent, and she said that it was just for the casting director to take a look. And then signed an extras agreement with the crew. As for the character, it's the kind of passerby who passes by in a flash. Matthew never thought of going to the sky in one step, that would be impossible, which basically met his expectations. He doesn't know much about Hollywood himself, and what he knows is basically the popular goods in the era of crazy information dissemination, such as Angelina Jolie, who later married Brad Pitt, but the previous one, because he wanted to enter Hollywood. Relationship, collected a lot of information, these memories are left. Therefore, Matthew's current position is very clear, that is, an extra, in the words of another country, also called an extra. No matter what kind of actor, if you want to get a job, you need an agent. It is not easy to get a job in Hollywood, but the threshold for becoming an actor in name is not high. Anyone who wants to be an actor, whether professional or extra, the first step is to find a photographer to take a few headshots and full-body photos, and then go to the brokerage company to register information such as height, weight, eye color, etc., sign an agency contract, and put it in the database for the brokerage company to contact the crew. The previous one has already completed this step. He has done a record in a small brokerage company, and there is still a broker's phone number in his mobile phone, but unfortunately the other party has never contacted him. Matthew took out his mobile phone and walked towards the bus stop while flipping through it. There is no better choice now. The agent who has a phone number in his mobile phone can try to contact him. If it really doesn't work, I'll find another small agency. Los Angeles is the seat of Hollywood after all. Actually, he wanted to find an agent. He thought of it after talking with Angelina Jolie, but yesterday he was busy renting a house and went to work at night, so he didn't have time to spare. According to the memory of the previous one, an agent is not only necessary for an actor to obtain a job, but an excellent agent can also help employers plan their future career path. Matthew also wants to go to a special performance training school for further studies, which is also necessary. But he was blindsided and needed advice from a professional like an agent. Hollywood not only has 5 big brokerage companies, but also many small companies that survive in the gap between the 5 big companies. The Starlight Company on Sunset Boulevard is one of them. This company is not large and has not been established for a long time. There are only 7 or 8 small brokers who have obtained licenses for a short time and do not have many resources. There are only 3 offices. The boss occupies one, and the finance department uses the least one. The rest are crammed into an oversized office. "Hey, Director Kuka, it's me, Dennis. We had dinner together the day before yesterday." The caller was a fat man with glasses, and even if the other party was just a casting director of a small production crew, he couldn't see it, and he still looked flattered. "Don't you need 20 corpses for your film? I've already contacted the manpower. Don't worry, there's absolutely no problem. These people have all played corpses, and they won't move if you kick them on the ground. When will we sign?" "Well." Probably the answer came from the other side, and the fat man smiled so much that he could not see his eyes. "I'll be there early tomorrow morning." Hanging up the phone, the fat man put away the flattery on his face and sat down on the chair. The chair made a terrifying creaking sound, as if it would be crushed by him at any time. "Damn business." Fatty rubbed his stiff face and complained in a low voice, "It's all this kind of unprofessional business." He always felt that the company's acting business made him inferior. He worked here for nearly a year. Among all the films that he has worked with the company, none of them were released on a large scale in theaters. The thing is, the TV series is a little better, but the business in this area is always in the hands of the boss, and it is impossible for him to intervene. Jingle bell, the phone on the desk rang. "Hello." He picked up the microphone. "This is Dennis from Starlight Company." "Ah, hello." A somewhat unfamiliar voice came from the receiver. "Are you Mr. Dennis Coulter?" "It's me." He thought that some business had come to the door. "I'm Matthew Horner." Dennis couldn't remember the name. "The actor who was on file with you some time ago." Hearing this, Dennis immediately understood that this is not business, just a who is daydreaming. "Are you okay?" There was a hint of impatience in his voice. "It's like this. I got a job as an extra in a production crew and needed an agent to sign up." Dennis became a little interested. "How many?" "1." Hearing this answer, Dennis's just increased interest disappeared without a trace. "Running errands for a temporary performance? How much can I get?" "Mr. Dennis Coulter." There was probably no voice over there, and he began to urge, "Are you still there?" The phone rang suddenly. Dennis picked it up and took a look. Seeing that it was a casting director who had business dealings with him, he immediately put the microphone in his hand aside, just in time to see the young man who had just joined the company last month in front of the desk opposite. Young has nothing to do, so he waved his hand, and said old-fashioned, "I have a business here, come and handle it." The younger manager took the microphone and started talking. Dennis Coulter connected the phone, and before he had time to speak, a furious voice came from inside. "Dennis, what are you doing? I want cheap non-union actors. Not expensive union actors. Actors you contacted. Why is there a union member? If I want to find a union member, won't I go to the actors union to issue a notice? What do I need to do with you?" "Sorry." Dennis Coulter quickly apologized. "Sorry. Maybe my assistant was negligent." "Where does he have any assistant? He just shirks the responsibility." "Tomorrow morning," he promised, "the appropriate actor information will be passed on to you tomorrow morning." There were a few more swearing words over there. Dennis could only listen, and after hanging up the phone, he rolled his eyes in anger while sitting on the chair. Wait, I want to make sure. The words of the young agent on the other side came over. You mean you got a job on James Mangold's Ghost Girl starring Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie? What? Dennis Coulter was stunned for a moment. James Mangold? Winona Ryder? Angelina Jolie? The girl who moved souls? How could these high-ranking names be involved with the little acting that he didn't even remember his name? If I remember correctly, this Sony Columbia Pictures film invested as much as $40 million. Not to mention him and his subordinates, even the boss of the company can't reach this level. Can't go wrong? Dennis Coulter is incredible. Yes. The faint voice over there was very certain. This job was introduced by Miss Julie. Julie? Angelina Jolie? Dennis Coulter stood up abruptly, rushed to the opposite side at a speed that was completely inconsistent with his fat body, grabbed the phone receiver, ignored the anger in the young man's eyes, and said loudly, "Sorry, there was a temporary call just now. I'm your agent, Dennis Coulter." Seeing Fatty being so shameless, the young man wanted to say something angrily, but he was hesitant again in the threatening eyes of the other party and the old-fashioned demeanor. "Hello, I'm Matthew Horner." The person on the other side didn't seem to realize anything. "Can you represent my business?" Dennis Coulter said immediately, "Yes. Of course. For an agent, such a business is nothing at all, but being able to represent this business means that he can deal with characters of the level of Angelina Jolie and the cast of The Girl Who Moved Soul. Levels like never before. Don't say it's him, even the whole company has never been in contact with him. This is tantamount to a stepping stone that opens the door to a more advanced business. Only a fool wants to act as an acting business agent forever and stay in such a small company with no future." Thinking of the opportunity to build a higher-level network, Dennis Coulter couldn't wait to say, "Well, Matthew, let's meet. You reading www.yuyuganshu.com. You come to the company, we meet in detail." Putting down the phone, Dennis Coulter found that the young man opposite was still looking at him, snorted coldly, and said, "What are you looking at? This is my client." He was right. The young man gave him one last look indignantly, and sat back in his chair helplessly. After about 40 minutes, the receptionist outside walked in with a young man, and as soon as he entered the door, he said, "Dennis, I'm looking for you." Following the eyes of the receptionist, Matthew saw a big fat man wearing glasses, and his visual weight was at least 200 kilograms. "Are you Matthew?" The big fat man greeted him with a smile on his face, and Matthew nodded. "Are you Mr. Dennis Coulter?" "Just call me Dennis," the fat man said familiarly. He glanced at his watch and said, "Come on, let's go to the coffee shop on the first floor to talk." Matthew had no objection. He followed the fat man to the cafe. The fat man asked for 2 cups of coffee and asked, "Is it the job that Miss Julie introduced?" "Yes." Matthew did not hesitate to use the tiger's skin as a banner, and said at the same time, "Please keep this a secret, Miss Julie doesn't want outsiders to know." Dennis Kurt nodded. "Tell me about the general situation." Matthew has made relevant preparations for a long time, and he has said everything he can say. In general, he came to Hollywood to find his dream, and he met Julie by chance, and then Julie helped him get a job as an extra. "Don't worry, I'll go with you on Monday." After listening to this, Dennis Coulter said proudly, "You only need to act, and I'll take care of the rest." Recommended ticket. Recommended ticket. Recommended ticket. Important things said 3 times. To watch today. There will be one watch at 9 o'clock and one at 3 o'clock. Brothers and friends, recommended tickets. Where are your recommended tickets? On Monday morning, Matthew had just finished washing when his phone rang. Agent Dennis Coulter was already waiting under the apartment building in his car. He put on a new suit and hurried downstairs to sit on the agent's desk. Car, rushed to Universal Studios together. On the way, Dennis Coulter told Matthew a lot of precautions, especially not to talk nonsense in the crew, not to be too curious, and if you see anything strange, you should not see it. Matthew nodded on the surface, but he didn't go into his ears. He started too low. If he wanted to climb up as soon as possible, he had to improve his hard skills such as acting, and he needed opportunities. But opportunities do not appear out of thin air, sometimes they also depend on creation. For example, helping Angelina Jolie catch a rape, if he doesn't make additional demands, where is the opportunity now? After thinking about it for the past few days, Matthew guessed a lot of reasons why Julie fulfilled the verbal agreement. There are only a few aspects. One is that this woman's personality is indeed different from ordinary people, and the other is that she is really going to divorce, and she doesn't care about anyone. What nonsense! Dennis Coulter drove to Universal Studios, entered the filming area where tourists stopped, parked the car and asked about it, and soon found the studio where the Girls of Soul's crew was located. Although it was still early, the shooting there were already people coming and going in the shed, and it was busy. Entering the studio and asking about the casting director's office, Dennis Coulter asked, "Do you want to say hello to Miss Julie?" "No need." Matthew guessed that Angelina Jolie didn't want to see him. "She asked us to go directly to the casting director." A trace of disappointment flashed in Dennis Coulter's eyes, but he didn't say anything. He moved his fat body and led the way, finding the door of the casting director's office. Knocked on the door, and there was a clear sound of coming in. The two of Matthew pushed the door and went in. A man between the ages of 30 and 40 was sitting behind the desk and seemed to be flipping through the documents. "Is that Mr. Rubin?" Matthew saw the other person nod and said quickly, "Miss Julie's assistant Vanessa told me to come over for an audition today." "Oh." The man named Rubin remembered, there is such a thing. Dennis Coulter has been listening with his ears pricked up beside him, then he stepped forward quickly, handed his business card with both hands, and said respectfully, "Hello, Director Rubin. I'm Matthew's agent Dennis." "Kurt." Rubin took the business card and put it on the table, then looked Matthew up and down, "Okay." He picked up the phone and pressed it casually, "John, there's an extra here, come and take them to sign an agreement." Matthew looked at Rubin and Dennis Coulter. "What about the audition? Is this the end?" A young man walked in and made a gesture of invitation, "Let's go to the legal department." Next to him, Dennis Coulter looked flattering, and after a few words to please Rubin, he successfully got his business card. Under the leadership of the young man, Matthew and Dennis Coulter left the office and walked towards the legal department of the crew, which specializes in contracts. Matthew asked in a low voice as he walked, "This counts as an audition. What do you think?" Dennis Coulter said with a slight disdain. "For the background board work that doesn't even have any lines, it's enough for him to glance at it. As long as he doesn't look very strange, it's the same for anyone else." Matthew nodded. What he said was very reasonable, and he felt the importance of opportunity more and more. Entering another office, a legal advisor brought a contract. Matthew took it and flipped through it. It was a little difficult to read. His own cultural level was too poor. If you want to develop in the future, you really need to recharge. At least reading in terms of writing, it can't be as bad as it is now. He just focused on the treatment, and gave the contract to Dennis Coulter. This kind of thing should be handled by the agent. Anyway, there is not much salary to get, and there is no need to worry about the trivial situation of the regular crew. Little people. Seeing Dennis Coulter flipping through the temporary contract, Matthew continued to think about his own affairs, and decided to go out later and find a bookstore to buy a few books on actors. Not only can he gain some professional knowledge, but also improve his reading level, killing two birds with one stone. The agent simply flipped through the pages and greeted Matthew, "Come here and sign." Matthew signed the name on the temporary contract in the past, and the young man who brought them said, "You can go, I will call when you need it." "Let's go." Dennis Coulter greeted Matthew, who was stunned for a while, but followed him out of the office. "Why are you chasing people?" Matthew asked. "I don't want you to work today." "What are you doing here, so that you will be paid when you are working?" Dennis Coulter said angrily. $6 an hour is not money, right?" Matthew shrugged. The extra contract he just signed was $6 per hour. He guessed that it might be the local minimum hourly wage standard, and the crew needed to pay the salary, not only during filming, but also when he was notified. The time spent waiting to come to work on the set is also included. And the salary is not directly paid to him. The crew will pay it to the agency. The agency will deduct 10% at the highest standard before crediting the rest to his account. After all, this job basically doesn't get you a lot of money. Matthew also fully understands why actors have to work part-time to support themselves when they are not famous. In such a job, if you work more than 20 days a month, it is not a problem to support yourself, but how many extras can take on so many plays in a month? That, Dennis. There was a previous breach of contract, and Matthew needed money very much. When will this salary standard be raised? Do you think you have less money? With no one around, Dennis Coulter said casually, "Join the Actors Guild and at least double the salary." Matthew then opened his eyes wide. "Really?" Dennis Coulter didn't even look at Matthew. "Of course it's true. The Screen Actors Guild has regulations that the minimum hourly wage for union members must not be less than $10 per hour, and the minimum daily wage must not be less than $120. Matthew is not an idiot. He immediately noticed that there was a problem. Does the crew dislike high-paid extras? Just like when he was waiting in the labor market, which boss doesn't like cheap labor? "You're very smart." Dennis Coulter patted Matthew's shoulder. "Old-fashioned. For someone like you, joining the Screen Actors Guild seems to be guaranteed, but in fact, you lose your only competitive advantage." He snorted. "Also, do you think you can enter the Actors Guild if you want?" Matthew blinked, looking like an ignorant fool. "Don't you mean the entry barrier is very low?" "Well, the entry threshold for the Screen Actors Guild is very low." Dennis Coulter strode forward, waiting for Matthew to follow, and then said, "There is a threshold for a low threshold. That's it." Matthew had to figure out some basic rules of the game. "Can you talk about it?" Dennis Coulter turned his head and glanced at Matthew, with a bit of impatience on his face, but for the sake of entering this studio with his stepping stone, he simply said, "I want to be an actor." Unions are not simple. You must meet the membership application qualifications before you can apply for membership. He coughed in a low voice and continued, "First of all, he has been a leading actor in a film, commercial, TV drama that has signed a contract with the union, and the salary is up to the union standard. You can also work in another production of the same standard 30 days, but must apply to join the union within these 30 days, or, any extra, if he has 3 independent working days to participate in the certificate of the union-approved production, and attaches the income certificate, he is also eligible to join the union." Hearing this, Matthew immediately knew that even if he wanted to join the trade union, he was not qualified. Dennis Coulter snorted again, "You need a lot of money. The entry fee in Los Angeles is $3,000, and like you, the half-year fee is $58. I'll continue to be free." Matthew made a decision immediately. Dennis Coulter said, "Old-fashioned, not very stupid." Matthew's eyes swept across his fat face, but said nothing. The two came to the door of the studio. Dennis Coulter suddenly stopped and said to Matthew, "Go back by yourself, I have something else to do." Without waiting for Matthew to speak, he turned around and walked towards the studio. Matthew frowned slightly. If he can't see this kind of action of removing the grind and killing the donkey, he is really an idiot. From Dennis Coulter's series of actions, it is not difficult for Matthew to see that the other party just regards him as a stepping stone to enter the crew. He shook his head. Now he can't care about these things. The two sides are using each other. Ignoring Dennis Coulter, who stayed in the studio, Matthew walked out of the filming area of Universal Studios. When he was looking for a bus stop near the entrance of the studio, he saw a large bookstore. This bookstore is located in the studio. On the road that must be passed by the tourist area, books on film and television are mainly sold. He wanted to buy a few books before, so he walked over immediately. After entering the bookstore, because it was still early, there were not many people in it, and the clerk only stood two at the cashier. When passing by the cashier, Matthew glanced in random, and found a relatively secret location behind the cashier. There was a monitoring monitor in operation. Monitoring is installed. He then walked into the bookshelves of the store, found a bookshelf with books related to actors, and pulled out a tome. Probably the opposite bookshelf was empty, and the position of the tome became a gap, and he could just see the two rows next door. The passage between the bookshelves. Matthew Ben didn't care, he just glanced at it subconsciously, but was caught by a woman. This woman has short black hair and her facial features are exquisite and flawless. From this angle, she is slender, pure, and beautiful. In addition to the beauty of women, she also has an absolutely handsome T-style. The second one is here. What about the recommendation ticket? What about collections? Anyone who sees such a beautiful woman will stop and look at it for a while, and Matthew is no exception. Due to the bookshelf in the middle, his eyes have been moving with the short-haired woman. She is beautiful, and she even runs to the bookstore. Can it be regarded as the intellectual beauty in the rumor? As soon as such a thought appeared, Matthew's eyes suddenly widened. The woman seemed to have found a book she liked and stopped in front of a bookshelf. With lightning speed, she pulled out two colorful 32 open books and stuffed them into his handbag. Matthew squeezed his eyes hard, as if he didn't believe what he saw in front of him. Such a slender, delicate, and innocent woman turned out to be a thief? The short-haired woman stuffed the book into her bag and continued to visit the bookstore as if nothing had happened. Matthew thought that she might have temporarily put the book in her bag, and when she paid at the cashier, she would take it out and quickly select several books about actors. Turned to the bookshelf on the woman's side, and found that the other party had already walked to the cashier. If she is a thief, it would be wonderful to be caught. Curious, Matthew followed, and when he passed by the bookshelf where the woman was holding the book, he took a special look, and there were indeed two vacancies on it. Just as he turned out of the bookshelf, the short-haired woman walked past the cashier with a handbag, and the two female clerks standing behind the cashier greeted her warmly, as if they knew her. The woman nodded and said directly, "Out the door." Matthew couldn't help shaking his head, walked over and put the book on the cashier counter, but didn't say anything. After paying, he left. Although this surprised him, he didn't need to mind his own business. In order to save money, he didn't call for a rental, and changed to a bus to go home. Although the small apartment he rented was old, it also meant that he had a fixed foothold in Los Angeles. Back home, sitting on the sofa that had collapsed in the middle, Matthew picked up one of the books he bought, opened it and read it. Skills and history, he read it for a while. Just like reading contracts before, he always found it difficult to read. Boom! Matthew closed the book. It was urgent to improve his reading ability. After thinking for a while, he went to the newsstand downstairs and bought 2 newspapers. Compared with the tome full of technical terms, the newspapers were less difficult to understand. After reading a tabloid, he set himself a task. From now on, he must set aside time to read every day to improve this most basic ability. When reading reaches a certain level, he will also need to exercise his writing ability. Even if you can't be a Hollywood star, you can't be semi-illiterate. There is also an acting school, which is also a very important matter, but don't worry, Matthew has checked in the past few days. If you are willing to further your studies, there are countless performance training institutions in Los Angeles. These institutions include professional performance schools, short-term training courses, temporary acting courses in various universities, performance lectures on Broadway, etc. For example, the Hollywood Film and Television Academy provides 6-month courses, 5 times a week. The problem is that these are expensive, and under the circumstance that liquidated damages may be added at any time, he is temporarily unable to pay such a large amount. Just thinking of the previous breach of contract, the phone rang. Matthew put it in his ear, and a very professional voice came, "Hello, is this Mr. Matthew Horner?" "I am." He had a bad feeling. "Mr. Horner, I'm lawyer Chris Walker." The man introduced himself, "The legal counsel of the Forbidden Tarot crew. I am now representing the crew and the company where the crew works, and I formally inform you that you have violated the contract between the two parties." "The contract?" Then he said a lot of technical terms and contract terms, which eventually turned into a sentence, "You need to pay $50,000 in liquidated damages. Please provide your address, and I will send you a formal lawyer's letter this afternoon." "Hello? Hello?" Matthew suddenly shouted loudly, "What are you talking about? I can't hear you clearly." "Damn phone, something went wrong again." After speaking, he directly opened the back cover of the phone and took off the battery. This is a no-brainer. It can only be done in a hurry. When the guy signed the contract with the Forbidden Tarot crew, all he left behind was real information. It will be a new century soon. In society, as long as the other party pursues the breach of contract, it is estimated that it will be useless for him to run back to the Texas countryside. $50,000 is not a small amount. Matthew frowned. "Should I also find a lawyer?" "If you find a lawyer, it is easy to reach an out-of-court settlement. It may not cost as much as $50,000, but the lawyer's fee is also a lot of expenses." Matthew knew very well that in the end it was a matter of money. If there was money, none of these problems would be a problem. When will I be able to be as carefree as Johnny Lee Miller? Thinking of this, Matthew put down his mobile phone, took the newspaper and books, and read it carefully again. If he didn't even have the ability, even if the opportunity presented itself, he would not be able to seize it. After reading books for a few hours in the apartment, he went out for a run in the afternoon, and had some dinner casually. Matthew went out again. Currently, the actor can only be described as a part-time job. His regular occupation is the driver of the Red Penguin Company. Went to list to get work assignments and car keys, endured the sarcasm of black people and fat people, and waited in the driver's lounge for a while. Matthew drove the Ford nanny car and set off to pick up people in Westwood District, and then take it to nearby Orange County. Picking up the blonde girl named Rachel from Westwood District, Matthew drove on the highway leading to Orange County. Just like last time, this girl was sunny and cheerful, sitting in the seat next to her and talking non-stop. "Handsome guy, how are you thinking?" she said carelessly. "Recently, a company is urgently recruiting male models. Your conditions are very good." Matthew didn't even think about it, he shook his head, "No. Your job earns very little." Rachel took out the mirror to touch up her makeup. "Can I support you?" "I found another part-time job," Matthew said. Rachel looked at him curiously. "Isn't that what you said last time, to be an actor?" "Yeah." Matthew nodded. "I've already got a job in a crew." "Cut." Rachel waved, "The kind of background board without lines." "Yeah." Matthew responded. Rachel hummed and said, "When I first arrived in Los Angeles more than a year ago, I had won several roles like this, and it was useless and had no chance." She shrugged and said in a relaxed tone, "For a long time, I wanted to commit suicide in desperation." "It's not like that." Matthew quickly turned his head and glanced at her. "It's hard to imagine such a sunny and cheerful girl wanting to commit suicide. You don't know the kind of poor people who can't even pay the rent, can't even eat." Rachel put away her smile. "Look at the despair that there is no way to go. I have experienced it." Matthew smiled. "I once thought about committing suicide." "Hey!" Rachel laughed again. "Why didn't you commit suicide?" I didn't find the right way. Matthew said half-truths. It hurts to use a knife, it's too wet to jump into a river, it stains clothes with sulfuric acid, you get cramps when you take medicine, guns are illegal, you can't hang yourself, and the gas stinks. So, let's just steal your life. You, haha. Rachel pointed at Matthew and laughed. Like last time, the two were chatting to pass the time. After getting off the highway, Matthew picked up another 3 girls in Orange County and sent them to their destination before dark. It is also a mansion, the difference is that this time it seems to be a formal party. However, none of this was his business. As usual, he parked the car outside the mansion out of the way. Matthew put the seat down to sleep, and when the next day dawned, he put a few tired girls next to each other. Sent back. After finishing work and not returning home, Matthew received a call from his agent, Dennis Coulter, informing him to report to the crew in the afternoon. Matthew hurried back home, took another nap, cleaned himself up a little, looked quite energetic, ate a little meal in advance, and rushed to Universal Studios. It was not even 12 o'clock noon when he got there. At the entrance of the studio, Matthew saw a fat figure again. Unlike the last meeting, Dennis Kurt looked high-spirited, as if a happy event was coming. Let's go. He beckoned to Matthew, let's go in. The two said a few words to the staff guarding the entrance of the studio and entered the office area they had visited before. Since it was lunchtime, most of the people went to eat, and the office area was empty. Hugh and Dennis Coulter sat on a bench in front of the casting director's office and waited patiently. Remember. Dennis Coulter seemed to be in a really good mood, and specifically told Matthew, do what you want to do when shooting, and don't make your own decisions. He waved his hand, you are just a background board. Normally, you can just stand still. It's not difficult. Matthew nodded, I remember. This is the first step in accumulating experience and qualifications. When he came to Los Angeles, he basically smeared his eyes. With experience and qualifications, he will have a higher chance of getting a role in the future. I'm going out to the toilet, you wait here, don't run around. If it wasn't for this stepping stone to play a role, and to get in touch with the casting director Ruben, Dennis Coulter would not be too lazy to say this, there may be additional performances in a while, so don't conflict with people. Matthew nodded, and Dennis Coulter turned and walked away. Sitting here was so boring, Matthew couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to play for the first time in the afternoon. After thinking about it for a while, the sound of high heels stepping on the floor suddenly came from the other side of the corridor, and then from a corner, a man came over. Slender girl. Matthew glanced over there and found that it was Angelina Jolie who had dyed her hair blonde. He thought she was here to find him, so he quickly stood up and waved his hand. Unexpectedly, Angelina Jolie didn't even look at her, she just pushed open a door and broke in. Why? Why do you want to cancel yesterday's scene? Angelina Jolie's angry roar sounded immediately, you want to cut my part. A cold and empty female voice followed, I'm the producer, this is a normal shooting adjustment. For the movie. Angelina Jolie's angry voice came again, Winona Ryder, you really put gold on your face. Julie. The cold voice also raised its tone. The two heroines of this film clashed? Matthew pricked up his ears curiously. Angelina Jolie seemed very angry and didn't care about Winona Ryder's face at all. Do you think I don't know what you think? You asked to cancel yesterday's scene because I overpowered you. This heroine. You want to cut my part because I have performed better than you since filming started. The voice became louder and louder, you are doing this just to worry that I will steal the limelight of your heroine. Whatever you say. Unlike the furious Angelina Jolie, Winona Ryder's voice was always cold, this is my power as a producer, you, just a supporting actress, and have no right to interfere. Matthew thought about it and remembered that Dennis Coulter said that Winona Ryder is not only the heroine of The Girl Who Moved Seoul, but also a producer. Even if he doesn't know Hollywood in particular, he knows that the film industry here is a producer-centric system. The room suddenly became quiet. Obviously, this sentence blocked Angelina Jolie. After a while, Angelina Jolie's voice sounded again. However, this time, he wasn't so angry. Don't think that you can do things because you contributed to this project. Suddenly, Angelina Jolie's voice rose again. Don't think I can't see that you are a bitch. Real like to pretend to be innocent. Pretend innocent. Just like you. Bang! After this sentence, there was a loud slamming sound. Angelina Jolie slammed out the door and walked away coldly. Matthew looked at Angelina Jolie's back, and didn't mean to lean in from beginning to end. In this crew, whether it was Angelina Jolie or Winona Ryder, they were all gods. The existence of a small person like him can only find it boring. Then, two more people came out of that room. Unlike Angelina Jolie, they walked towards Matthew. Winona. One of the girls with eyes that seemed to be an assistant asked, "Would you like to?" Halfway through speaking, she saw Matthew sitting on the bench in the corridor, staring straight at Winona Ryder, and immediately shut up. The two women got closer and closer, and Matthew looked at Winona Ryder with obvious surprise in his eyes. Because of Captain Jack Depp's relationship, he knew there was such a woman, but he couldn't remember what it looked like. Winona Ryder is wearing a white shirt, light blue jeans, and short black hair that matches her ears. Her facial features are exquisite and flawless. From this angle, she looks slender, pure, and beautiful. Matthew is sure that he has seen her, just a few days ago. He will never admit his mistake. Isn't this the female thief who stole books in the bookstore? This is what surprised Matthew. Johnny Depp's ex-girlfriend, the film's producer and heroine Winona Ryder, turned out to be a thief. She shouldn't be short of money, right? Why steal books? Isn't stealing books called stealing? Just when Matthew thought so, Winona Ryder and the assistant walked past him. Maybe he kept staring at each other, or maybe he was not bad. Winona Ryder turned her head curiously. Glanced at him. Winona Ryder didn't see Matthew at that time. She quickly turned around and walked away from the female assistant. This person. The female assistant seemed to know Matthew. I saw the information from Ruben, and I heard from Ruben that Vanessa introduced him, and it was the Angelina Jolie relationship. Hearing the female assistant's words, Winona Ryder couldn't help but turn her head and glance at Matthew again. Matthew was sitting on the bench, in a trance of boredom. He really couldn't understand why a beautiful woman like Winona Ryder with money, status would steal a few worthless books. Time passed quickly, and several extras came over under the leadership of an agent. They formed a small group of their own. They looked at Matthew and didn't mean to say hello. Matthew was still waiting here quietly. After a long period of time, the agent Dennis Coulter accompanied the casting director named Ruben into the corridor. Dennis Coulter looked flattered, and Ruben seemed to very useful, with a big smile on his face. For these agents who represent the business of extras, casting directors undoubtedly have the power of life and death. Ruben entered the office. Dennis Coulter stayed and sat next to Matthew, glanced at the other people, and said, "I tried my best to get you. Your role is to stand behind the heroine Winona Ryder." One of the male nurses, "Although there are no lines, but there will be positive shots." Even though he knew that this should be Angelina Jolie's face, Matthew said, "Thank you, I will definitely perform well." Don't. Dennis Coulter hurriedly warned, "You stand there as a background board, and don't do anything else." Matthew nodded hastily, There is nothing wrong with listening to an agent in this kind of thing." After sitting here and waiting for nearly half an hour, the casting director Ruben came out of the office, called the young man from last time, and asked the extras to follow him to the outside of the studio. In order to get familiar with the venue, the young man specially brought a group of people to pass by the periphery of the shooting area. Matthew looked around curiously. The studio was arranged like a hospital. The long corridors and independent rooms were clearly visible, and each room was clearly visible. There are gaps, which seem to be reserved for camera positions. He hadn't seen the movie or the script. He only knew that it seemed to be a story about a neurotic patient, and the specifics were not very clear. The young man took them to a makeup trailer and handed them over to a male makeup artist. Let them go first. Dennis Coulter stopped Matthew, who was trying to get into the makeup trailer. Although he didn't quite understand it, Matthew stopped and gave the opportunity to put on makeup first to a few other extras. Hurry up! The young man urged, don't waste time. The makeup trailer was very small and could not hold a few people. A middle-aged uncle walked in first, and the rest stood outside waiting. Maybe it was a good job in the crew. Dennis Coulter was in a good mood. Seeing Matthew looking at him suspiciously, leaning on the makeup trailer, he explained in a low voice, the crew treats you differently. Non-union extras use the worst makeup, and those things are harmful to people's skin, and the longer they stay on the face, the greater the damage. Matthew immediately understood, is it true that the bigger the actor, the more makeup he wears last? Dennis Kurt nodded, almost. Then he added, many first-line celebrities will make the crew wait for them. Can an extra like me not wear makeup? Matthew touched his face. When the ghost came here, the only thing that made him feel relieved was this tough and handsome face. Dennis Coulter shook his head, actors whose faces may be photographed in the frontal camera must wear makeup. He could see that this young, tall, and handsome guy could basically be classified as a layman. If he hadn't been a good stepping stone, he might still be useful in the future. He didn't bother to deal with this kind of stuff. None of these extras will play important roles, they are all background boards, and the makeup artist can't take care of them, just simply put on a base makeup, but in just 20 minutes, including Matthew and everyone inside. With a layer of foundation on his face, Matthew always felt uncomfortable, but he didn't dare to touch it, it would be troublesome to touch the makeup. The roles of these extras are very simple, even so simple that they are not worth mentioning, but the preparation work is not easy at all. After putting on makeup and changing costumes, Matthew put on a white coat belonging to a nurse, and the crew he prepared a lot of white coats of different sizes, and he guessed that this was the reason why they didn't come over to try on the clothes in advance. Although it was only a background board role, the crew was very strict. After Matthew and several other extras finished modeling, an assistant director came over to check it out and confirmed that there was no problem before taking them into the studio. According to Matthew's idea, this is a movie with an investment of tens of millions of dollars, and no link will be sloppy. The assistant director took them to the central area of the studio, which was laid out like a living room, with coffee tables, long sofas, single sofas, and TVs placed on the flat floor. Reading www.yuyugonshu.com. 2 cameras are installed on the same side of the living room without a wall, and the spotlights are frequently turned on and off, as if debugging. As soon as they arrived, a middle-aged man with a beard came over. Matthew guessed that it was the director. He personally explained a few words to the assistant director, and the assistant director began to arrange the positions of several people one by one. "You, come here." The assistant director greeted Matthew. Matthew hurried over and stood behind a single sofa facing the camera. The assistant director looked at the camera and said, "Go a little to the left." Matthew is like a marionette in the hands of the assistant director. Behind the camera, someone made a gesture, and the assistant director said, "Okay. Just stand here and don't move." "Yet." Matthew nodded quickly. The assistant director warned, "After filming starts, don't laugh and don't act strangely." "Yet." Matthew nodded again. The assistant director went to do other work. Matthew stood here and waited patiently. After a few minutes, actresses came out one after another, and sat in their respective positions according to the director's request. Then, Matthew saw Angelina Jolie enter the set accompanied by an assistant, greeted the director familiarly, chatted a few words, and sat on the conspicuous couch. Angelina Jolie saw Matthew, turned her head and glanced. Matthew smiled at her, and she turned her head back again as if she didn't know him. After waiting for a while, Winona Ryder with short hair appeared. She walked towards the single sofa in front of Matthew. A pair of beautiful eyes naturally fell on Matthew, and immediately frowned.